It is a pleasure to have President and CEO of New England College of Optometry, the one and only Howard Purcell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve. Happy to be here with you.
It's great to see you. And before we dive in today, if you don't mind, maybe just sharing a little bit about your journey into optometry and what led to your role as president and CEO of NECO.
No, happy to. Every time I tell this story, though, it sounds like I can't keep a job because I've bounced around a little bit. But I've been so fortunate in this profession. I'm a graduate of NECO. My father's a graduate of NECO, so it's a very special place for me. Got out of school, joined my dad's practice in Miami Beach, where I grew up. My dad's from the Northeast, from Brooklyn, but got out of the cold weather and moved down and started a private practice in South Florida. So I spent 10 years in that practice. During the time I was there, an optometry school came to town, Nova Southeastern, and I was asked to be on the advisory panel to the new school and ultimately to join the faculty. So my only real faculty or academic experience has been 5 years at Nova, where I was chief of cornea contact lenses there. So loved it, enjoyed myself, was still in practice at the time, so I got to bounce back and forth a little bit as Nova was within 5 miles of where my practice is. And then I spent 25 years in industry. 13, almost 13 and a half, almost 14 or so at J&J. I loved it. Just learned so much there. I had so many great supporters and mentors that helped me to learn the ropes, if you will, in the industry. And I was very proud to represent our colleagues at J&J and with a group of people who really cared a lot about where contact lenses were going and the role that optometry played in that. And then moved on to Essilor. I was with Essilor for 10 years during the transition also to Essilor-Luxottica. And then had this amazing opportunity. I've been on the board of NECO, of New England College of Optometry, and Scotty, the president at the time, who'd been at NECO for 50 years, 50 years, president for 9, had decided he was going to retire, and the college was looking to make some changes, to adjust, to adapt, to maybe bring some new thinking. And I didn't have a ton of experience in academia other than the 5 years I mentioned, and it was quite a while ago. But the college was ready for change, and I think importantly so. We're going through so much change. So I've been so fortunate in optometry. I've had a chance to see our profession from so many different perspectives. I feel blessed, and I really feel a big responsibility to try to do what I can to help NECO continue to grow and thrive, and really to support all the schools and colleges. And they need our support. You know, I was one of those, honestly, who was critical of the schools and colleges. And then I found myself inside and getting a different perspective. And we started something called the Industry Collaborative for that very reason. The whole idea was to say, if I had known then what I know now, I could have been a much better partner. And so how do we lift up the hood and show what's going on in optometric education? But I've been blessed with an incredible career, a chance to see our profession from so many perspectives. And I will say this, I have the utmost respect for our faculty, what they do at all the schools and colleges, the commitment they make to our profession, the dedication they have, what they give every day to make sure these students are learning everything they can. It's so easy to be critical, but let me tell you, their job is immense. You think about it, when my dad went to school here in the 50s, NECO was a 4-year program. And it's a 4-year program today, but we have broadened the scope of optometry, and it's fantastic, has broadened so much. But what we forget is the burden that places on our faculty and what they have to teach in a similar amount of time, and the volume of information we're asking our students to learn. It's significant, and we owe them a great deal of gratitude and respect for the work that they do.
Well, thank you, Howard, for that background. Very interesting path you've taken. I appreciate the shout out. Thank you for your commitment, first of all, but I appreciate the shout out as well toward the faculty and all the other people that make this thing work. I don't know if I appreciate it as much as when I was in school. You just couldn't wait to get out, but now you look back and see the dedication and commitment that comes from a lot of the faculty. It's that last leg of the journey for you that I think connected us today. What I want to talk about is understanding the mind of the student or the new grad. And I think you will have great insights on that because you're working with them, directly with them, and you're getting a lot of that firsthand feedback. You work closely with a lot of optometry students. How have you seen their expectations and career goals shift over the years?
Interesting. Yeah. So I do get to work with incredible group of young people. Our average student is a 22, 23-year-old female. So NECO, we're about 80% female. And as you, I'm sure know, and your listeners know, we've had this evolution since I was a student, almost a complete 180 of men to women, right? So this has evolved significantly. The first thing that came to mind when you asked the question of what their expectations are, is something I hear frequently, and I actually think it's a good thing, which is I want to practice to the full extent of my licensure. I am busting my butt for 4 years to learn the medical. Honestly, it's so much more focused on the medical component these days that I want to be able to know that when I graduate, I can use that's something I'm going to do every day. And what I like about it, honestly, is a few things, Steve. Number one, I get it and I understand why they're saying it, but also it helps to put a little pressure on perhaps, and we won't name anybody, but there are groups out there that are hiring our graduates that isn't as important to them. There are other things that perhaps could be more important. And so I hear over and over from students, and I think it now is putting pressure on employers, because by the way, our students are in a very good position today. Supply and demand very much working in their favor, right? So they're in a good position from that standpoint to be able to say, here's kind of what I'm looking for. Here's what I want. And what I probably hear the most frequently, there are other things, but the one I hear the most frequently is, will I be able to practice to the full extent of my licensure? And again, why I like that is for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is it puts a little pressure on some of these groups to say, wow, well, if we want to hire optometrists, and they do, perhaps we need to think about this a little bit more. Like, how do we allow our graduates to practice to the full extent of their licensure while still addressing the importance of the business model they have and having the graduate understand that? And that's why I feel it's so important. They should have skin in the game when it comes to helping them to offset some of their cost as well. But I would say the number one thing I hear of expectation-wise would be practicing to the full extent of my licensure. The other kind of interesting component to me is typically 70 to 75% of the students who come into the college say they want to be in private practice. Now, if you ask them to define private practice, and I would suggest if you ask our colleagues to define private practice, you'd get a lot of different answers today. I won't put you on the spot, Steve, but probably you and I have different maybe opinions on if we were to describe what is private practice. But let's just for a minute say that, a good portion of them, a good majority of them are saying, I want to be in private practice. How do we find a vehicle then to allow that to happen? And I think part of the issue has been both debt and the fact that I've never run a business before. Those two are almost equal. Because even the students who are, okay, I'm comfortable with my debt, I got some help, I got some loans, some people are supporting me. Still, I've never run a small business. I don't know how to do that. We have to help them with it. And I was the first to be critical of schools and colleges doing a bad job of that. You guys need to teach the business of optometry. Well, when you come inside, you recognize that it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. We have 4 years to teach, well, actually 3 years, because the final year, you're all over the world in your externships, right? So you have 3 years to teach a massive amount of information. No one is testing our graduates at any national boards on the business of optometry. So our commitment is to making sure we're getting you through the information you need to get a license. So I don't see that being solved anytime soon. But smart people like you, wonderful organizations like the one you're a part of, could perhaps help us in creating a postgraduate education course that's a course or a week and a half course that's the business of optometry. And for those students, no matter what, or those graduates, no matter what aspect of optometry you're going into, to provide that foundational knowledge. We do some of it, but they're not paying that much attention to it. It's not critical to the immediate needs they have. So I try to answer your question in the best way I could, but also give you a little color around the idea that they want to be better business people. They want to assure that they can practice to the full scope of their licensure. They want to be somewhere that they can make their own decisions on where to go, at least the majority of them. But we haven't yet, and we're getting better, provided that wonderful path for that where we can help support their debts and also, a quid pro quo, join our practice. We'll help you offset some of your debt. That's what the retailers are doing. I'd love to see private practices do that. But I think what they're looking for is they want that independence and they want to be able to practice to the full extent of their licensure. Now, have they changed? Yes. Every generation is different. And, I could spend an hour talking to you about how things have evolved and how does academia adapt to that? Do we adapt to that? You know, some faculty members will say, hey, this is the way I've done it. I've taught students, they've done well, they've passed their boards, you know, put your big boy and girl pants on and show up to class and do your thing. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is we adapt completely, we coddle, we make sure we're doing everything to minimize any frustration, challenges, whatever that these students have. Neither one of those are realistic, in my opinion. So we have to find some middle ground, some way to adapt, to understand that this is a different generation, that they look at things differently, but to not adapt so much that we've lost what really the foundation of what we do. We're trying to change optometric education, and that is part of the things that we're looking at. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And you mentioned something when you started on the supply and demand issue, which is something I hear a lot as well. And I don't hear it as much, but for a while, it felt like every other week they were putting up a new optometry school. And so some of the thinking was that there's going to be too many doctors out there. Well, there's just not. There's way more openings than there are ODs. So the supply and demand definitely favors the job seeker. It really is a great time to be an OD and be in the market from a supply and demand standpoint.
Couldn't agree
And you
more.
mentioned
Couldn't agree
the
more.
75% that say they want to be a practice owner. I hear this a lot from the other side where an associate will come into a practice and the senior doctor or the practice owner will say, I'm bringing in somebody and they say they want to be an owner. And I'll usually respond, do they even know what that means? And it's not a negative take on the younger ODs. They just, in all fairness, haven't had the business education to really understand what's involved with that. So it's a great point that I think we can all step up. Certainly the organization that I work with, IDOC, that's a big part of what we do, but even just practitioners out there being mentors for other young ODs, not just on the clinical front, but on the business front as well, for those who do want to pursue more of an entrepreneurial path.
I'm so glad you said that because I try to espouse this all the time. Our best recruitment, we can do all the marketing in the world, everything we do, it happens between a current optometrist and someone who's thinking about the profession. That's where the rubber meets the road. So people who are listening here, I hope appreciate that, love what they're doing, enjoy the profession, appreciate the education they got at whatever optometry school they went to, and that they're going to be the advocates. You've got people sitting in your chair every day who might be potential opportunities to look at optometry as a profession. It's one of the best kept secrets in medicine, in my opinion, and it shouldn't be. I feel like I could convince anyone to be an optometrist, and I bet a lot of my colleagues do. You know, I mean, you're going to change people's lives every day. You're going to make a good living. You're going to have the respect of being a doctor. You can have a good work-life balance. I mean, these are things that there are not very many medical professions can offer that. So how do we make sure we communicate that there's an awareness of it? And the best way is when those people are in your office and you see someone who's a little curious, they're kind of leaning in, they're asking you questions, talk about optometry, tell them what a wonderful profession it is. Almost every student who, at least at NECO, almost every student who applies here who gets an interview talks about that as a driving force behind why they're sitting there today. So we have this incredible opportunity, and the great people that you work with and the people who listen to this, you can play a role in helping us to bring a better and better and a better and better qualified and larger applicant pool. You're right. We're adding schools, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But the problem, Steve, is we're not going to a bigger pond. We're not fishing in a bigger pond. We're all fishing in the same place. Think about it this way for a minute. We have 30 states that don't have an optometry school. It might be 29 now. It's hard to keep up. It's moving fast. If you live in one of those states, optometry is not an option for you, or you have to pack your bags and move your family somewhere. I want to take that away. I want to make sure that if you live in a state where you don't have an optometry school, you don't have to move. Because by the way, in many cases, those are states that are underserved. And, you know, I'll get back to another point you made, which is, do we have too many optometrists? Do we have not enough? This is a debate that I think we should stop wasting our time on. Where we all agree is that there are regions that don't have enough optometrists. There are some who won't agree. People feel we have too many optometrists. If you're in Boston, if you're in Dallas, if you're in Miami, if you're in LA, you probably feel like there are too many optometrists. But I promise you, even in Massachusetts, when I go a little west, there are no, there's islands, there's deserts where we don't have people caring for anyone. So let's just go to the part we can agree on, which is regionally we have a challenge. How do we solve that? We believe we have some ways that we can solve that by bringing our education to a new audience. To fish in a different pond than we've been fishing in, it's challenging. It's challenging because the accreditors, who do a wonderful job, have standards that were written that never considered these type of offers. So it's going to be a while before we can do it, but we are determined, and we're approaching it in many different ways to try to find new ponds to fish in. If you want to build a new school, great, continue to do that. But what are you going to contribute to growing the pool? I think that has to be part of it. And unfortunately, it doesn't get talked about, or it doesn't get the attention I think it needs. And we all can play a role. And I guess that's why I mention it, because people are listening here could play a role in helping bring great candidates, people who are qualified, who are interested, who want this profession. I get to spend time with these people all day. Let me tell you, if you ever have a bad day in optometry, spend a day at an optometry school. Students will get you fired up. They are so excited. Some of them, and I feel this responsibility, some of them, this is what they've wanted since they were 10 years old. It's like, and that's a big responsibility that we have. But I mean, let me tell you, they are great people. They want to support this profession. Some of them want to dig in and do, everything they can do. Some of them want a good work-life balance. That's fine. That's human nature. That's who we are. But we have incredible people coming into this profession. And the big change, another big change we've seen, it's not like I didn't get into medical school, so I'm coming to optometry school. It's actually, I want to be an optometrist. And that is just so inspiring. And I love being around this environment. I got to tell you, it's not easy. Believe me, it's a challenging job. Being a college or university president these days is not the easiest job in the world, but I wasn't here for easy. I'm here to try to, leave it better than we found it, like we all want to do. But the best thing about this job are our students. They are amazing. They're going to lead this profession to heights we haven't even imagined. They're going to help us decide how we use AI and virtual reality and 3D printing and telehealth and all these amazing technologies. They are going to help us to understand how to use it and be selective of what things are going to help. Our future is in great hands. And if you don't think that, spend a day at an optometry school.
I'm glad you mentioned before, just going back to that one more time, the higher percentage of doctors that say they're still interested in some form of ownership or having control over the practice. Because there's a sentiment within the industry that the younger ODs aren't interested in owning. And I've never felt really that that's the case, but there's some kind of a gap or breakdown there. And maybe it is a lack of business education, which I'm glad you brought up. You made a very good point. The schools in that 4 years, that's not their thing. You have a lot of responsibility to make sure that they're good doctors when they go out into the workforce. So let's not put too much pressure on the school there, but how can we step up to give them more of a business education? But can we talk about debt for a second? Speaking of something that's not easy, and this is nothing new. This even goes back to when I graduated. The desire to be an owner, but getting out of school with a tremendous amount of debt, taking you down a path of non-ownership for a lot of ODs, and sometimes down that path where they don't get, and I'm not naming names either, but some uh, in some practices, some practice settings, you don't get as much opportunity to practice that full scope of care. So some doctors, unfortunately, end up in a very unfulfilling, to them, not to everybody. But if your goal is to practice a certain way and you find yourself practicing a way that's not really aligned with what you wanted to do, you can find yourself in an unfulfilling position. And sometimes it's debt that drives people to the highest paying job. Where are we at with that? Because I know it was high when I graduated, and that was a long time ago. I see some of the numbers nowadays, and holy cow, it can be a lot of money.
Well, it's an issue across academia, and I'm not going to get politics at all here. I'm just saying, I'll give you an example. Down the road here, BU, I can see it at Boston University. I can see it out my window. Almost $80,000 a year to go to Boston University. Makes $50,000 for optometry school. Actually sound palatable, but we will begin to get to a point, Steve, where we will price ourselves out of the game. This is not sustainable. I want to be clear. And the math problem, you're a smart guy. This is an easy math problem, okay? Your number one revenue source is tuition. Your number one expense is your people. So therefore, if I want to give my people a 3.5% to 4% raise, that's not huge, but it's okay. then I got to raise my tuition 3.5%. That's the model. At least, private independence, it's a little bit more. And we only have 3 of those left. We can talk about that later. But, in a private independent model, which is the one I'm most familiar with, it's a simple math exercise. I mean, there are other pieces, but those are the big pieces. So how do you influence that? We've taken the approach of something called sponsored pathways, which says, and it only works when supply and demand is where it is right now, which says, fine, you want to hire Dr. Vargo, that's great, but why don't you help him offset some of his debt? So let's set up a quid pro quo, where if Dr. Vargo agrees to work for you when he graduates, you'll pay for at least 2 years of his education, and he'll give you 3 years when he graduates. After 3 years, if he loves it and you've made this environment wonderful for him, he stays. If he hates it, he leaves. He has half the debt he would have had. We started this about 4 years ago. We now have 7 groups that are participating, mostly retailers, but not all. There are private practices involved in this as well. We want our students to have a range of opportunities to choose from. So this is one way we have tried to address it, because to start to say, all right, we're going to lower tuition, I don't see that happening anytime soon. To say we're going to keep it stable is hard to do. Then am I going to say to my people, well, nobody gets any raises anymore? That's just not realistic. So we have to find other ways. What's wonderful about sponsored pathways is everyone wins. The student has a job when they get out. The employer knows when they're getting an employee when they leave, and the college gets its full tuition. And then the student, of course, the biggest bell ringer, the student has much less debt when they get out. Now there's actually some companies offering to pay for all 4 years for a 5-year commitment. What I'd like to see, and I think this is one, not the only, but one way to address it. What I'd like to see is as many private practices involved in this. And how can we set it up in a way that could work so that it's not, from a financial perspective, not impossible, but can allow a student, a graduate, the opportunity to learn from that owner, because you're right, and we talked about it, the other piece is I've never run a business. All right, we've got someone who's going to help you with that now. And especially if they're part of something like iDoc, now you've got a network to help support you, right? So I see our networks, our groups like iDoc being a perfect ripe spot to participate in something like this and allow people who are members to say, hey, survey, how many of you are looking to, bring in an associate, or you're 5 years from retirement or 10 years from retirement? Can we talk about how we can match up with a student, get to know them, meet them through a couple of years while they're in school? And if it works, we create some relationship there. It matches up with what the students are looking for. It helps offset some of the debt. It brings that doc who's getting ready to retire, who really hasn't been able to find anyone for their practice. To me, it's not the only solution, but it's one, and so far seems to be working pretty well. Our first year of the program, we offset about $1.8 million in debt, and that was year one. I haven't calculated it. Now that we have 7, we had 3 groups back then. Now that we have 7, but you can do the math. It's probably over $2 million in debt, just as we're just getting started here on this program. So it's those kinds of things that I think are going to help us to address it. It's a problem, but it's not an easily solvable problem. And we do our best to keep the tuition, believe me, to the lowest we can possibly do. But we also have to take care of our people and make sure people are compensated appropriately. So we continue to look for other ways. But right now, sponsored pathways to us is a really nice vehicle. And I believe, look, people have been critical a little bit, and I'll just say this because I'm sure someone listening going, you're pushing all these people into retail. Okay. No, these people are already being hired by retail. What I'm saying is, you want to hire them? Fine. Well, you'll help offset some of their costs too. That's all I'm saying. I didn't start anything of students deciding they're going to work at, pick one, Warby Parker or LensCraft, or, pick anyone. I didn't start that, I promise you. But what I have done is said, fine, hire them, but help them pay for some of their debt. And no one said no to that. No one has said no to that. It just shows you where the supply and demand is at the moment. Now, look, if Steve wants to have 3/4 of his debt paid for, he might have to spend a couple years in, pick a little more rural area, Western in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is west of Boston, right? He might have to go there. Is it worth it to him to have half the debt or 1/4 of the debt left? For some, it is. This isn't for everybody. But for the people it's for who really, I'll end with this part of it, Steve, with this. In my 6.5 years here, I've never had students come to my office except for this and say, this program's changed my life. When I hear that, I figure we're doing something good. And now it's at all the schools. I'm thrilled that many schools are looking at this option too, and the employers are looking to do this. NECO can't supply all of the optometrists that are needed, but this is one way, and we have to be creative like this. We have to figure out ways to find money from other sources. Because by the way, Steve, 50 grand, these retailers are losing 50 grand in a month when they don't have an OD. So 50 grand a year, I can handle that if I get an employee, sure. I want to see how we get the independent world to think that way, and groups like yours that could facilitate something like that. So I got to believe you have many of your members who are at least starting to think about that and wondering, what's next? How do they find a great person and what's involved in trying to do that? It's not easy today because there's so much high demand, but we can find ways to make that work.
Yeah, and I will tell you that having been doing this for 10 years and done literally thousands of consultations at this point, the issue of where do I find an associate is right up there at the top. It's right behind the always popular staff management issues. And so I'm going to tell you, if you're a younger OD, a new grad, if you're on optometry school and you're serious about going into more of an entrepreneurial path, one of the best lessons that I've learned more in a consulting role that I wish I understood it better when I was practicing is the leadership side. Read books, find out everything you can, learn how to work with other people, lead teams. It's so important. I really underappreciated the value of that. If you're even if you're not the owner, but in some form of leadership role.
It's a great
Howard,
point. I don't want to let that
no, go ahead.
I'm
Yeah,
not going to
jump
say
in.
anything other than I totally agree. And we do try to focus on that. People do stand out. I'll tell you, I have the utmost respect for students who join student council. This is a rigorous program. All right. I'm not sure I've said this publicly. I'm not sure I could get through the program today. It's incredible. And yet we have these students who step up and want to be student leaders. Those people are amazing to me. First year you're on student council. First year is just like fire hose. It's amazing, but yet those are the leaders. Those are the ones that, you can see right away who these incredible leaders are and how they already give back to the profession. And they are the influencers. It's cool to be smart is an environment you tried to create, right? And one thing I think is really cool at NECO is that our leaders here have made it cool to be smart. And to me, that changes a lot and sets a bar at a place where we need it to be. But I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, very valuable lessons learned in roles like what you're talking about that I don't know if you'll fully appreciate until years later in practice. The Occasionally you'll hear, although I hear it less often because there is such a supply and demand issue around hiring an OD with more experience versus a younger OD that potentially takes more time to ramp up. But let's flip that. What is the advantage? Because you mentioned a few things before that didn't even exist, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe. Things like AI, virtual reality, 3D. What does the younger generation bring that maybe sets them apart from a more experienced OD? I want to be careful that we don't get our HR departments in trouble for some kind of age discrimination thing, Howard. But you
Right.
know what I'm asking. There's a reality. I
Well,
need
it's a
something done.
generational
I
thing.
turn to my kids and say,
Right.
"Dear teens, do this for me." So, but what added value, added skill sets do you potentially bring to the office by hiring, let's just say it, a younger OD?
Yeah, so many. But I guess I'll start with that this has historically been the case, and I'll use myself as an example. When I graduated optometry school and joined my father's practice, it was a 35-year-old practice, thriving practice, doing great. And what came of it that was positive was I was able to bring the newer things I learned to the practice. And I'll be more specific on that in a second. And I was able from my father to learn the business of practice. So we were able to put together what our strengths were. He taught himself slit lamp. He taught himself BIO. He didn't learn any of that in school. I was able to bring more of that to the table and different ways of doing things. And so the value I brought was the more modern, newest and latest and greatest. Not that our colleagues, more senior colleagues, aren't keeping up with that, but having had experience in that. Our students are graduating with surgical experience, with laser experience. Many of our colleagues, I put myself in that category, we never even touched a laser when we were in optometry school. So I think it's the same we see as the evolution. Our students, and you should demand this, and you should be interviewing them and asking me these questions, is, they're getting themselves engaged in telehealth. Every NECO student who graduates will have had some experience in telehealth, just as one example, right? They're using artificial intelligence every day in many of the things that they do. They're looking at ways to use 3D printing in a way we could never imagine, because what they see, and they tell me this, is one day we'll be 3D printing frame and lenses in our office. You can customize what someone needs. This is real. This is not, I've seen lenses that have been 3D printed now, spectacle lenses. You're going to see it in every category. They're going to have experience in this. They're going to be able to give you, and by the way, it isn't just sort of broad acceptance. Like this generation, just because they grew up much more perhaps engaged in some of the technology stuff than perhaps my generation did, that doesn't mean they're just like, oh yeah, everything is great. Our research, when people come in or do research, initially I would suggest, why don't you have some students involved? And at first they were reluctant, but now they see the value because these students give them such great feedback. It's a non-biased feedback in many ways. So it isn't just bring on anything. It's a very critical, my observation at least, is a very critical assessment they do of these tools. And how are they going to make a difference for me? Are they going to make it easier for me to early diagnose? Are they going to help me to get to a patient population I'm not able to get to today? Is it going to make me smarter? Like I can find anything that's been published in the last 3 minutes on a subject that's sitting right in front of me that might be a little bit more rare. These are things they're going to be doing routinely. And I think every generation is like that. We all bring to the practice, fresh thinking, experience that we've had on things that maybe some of us didn't have in school, an encouragement to bring some of these new approaches. And, a lot of people didn't have a lot of experience in myopia management, just as an example. Any student graduating optometry school right now is going to have experience in myopia management as another example. But there are so many of those, the evolution that's happening in low vision, just as an example. Our students are so engaged in that and participating in that. So any practice to me, by bringing in a young person, the downside is you're going to have to teach them some of the business of optometry. You're going to have to show them that road. But what they're going to help you do is, at the very least, inspire you. But even more than that, bring services and technologies that they have experience in to your practice and help you ramp up on those. And I've seen that in every generation, to be honest, and it's no different now. But the difference now is what used to take 10 years to happen happens in a year now, or in 6 months. And that's why it's so much. Like students graduating now have had so many things we didn't have. And that's what I think they can bring, because what they're asking of you is to help them understand the business of optometry better.
Yeah, I find that they're much more adaptable as well, because just for that very reason, things change much quicker. If you go back far enough, you hung a shingle and the world didn't really change very quickly. And now that's not the case. And I think something that should be uplifting maybe for the younger ODs as well, when we look at things like AI, which I really think is going to revolutionize a lot of things we do. And you mentioned a few things more on the clinical side, making, for example, a clinical diagnosis easier. My world is more the practice management side, but I could see a world where going into business and having access to a lot of these AI tools, which are going to continue to evolve, potentially makes practice ownership much easier, potentially takes a lot of that. Where I know at iDoc, we have some services, because our doctors kept saying, we were more of a consultative role for doctors, and we would show them how to do things. And they said, can you just do it for me? So we started doing some things like bookkeeping and marketing to take that off their plate so they could focus on patient care. But I can see that continue to evolve down the paths that include things like AI, making it so. Hang in there. If you don't feel like, if you just graduated and you think, I don't have what it takes right now, or the business acumen, or I'm in school, and just hang in there, because I do think these tools are going to start to show up and implement themselves in greater magnitudes in offices.
I agree with you. I will say, AI is changing everything in academia too. We are in the midst of a huge evolution, and what AI is going to be able to do is going to be very significant. Some small things we're starting with, but particularly for private independent like ourselves and 2 others out there, when we can act bigger than we are, punch above our weight class, if that's an analogy everyone can appreciate, that's a huge advantage for us. And AI is a resource and a tool to be able to do that. Just a couple quick examples for you. Think about tutors in optometry school. it was funny when I first arrived here, everybody wanted a tutor. They didn't even know if they needed one, but they wanted one. Today, we can create an individualized tutor for you. And this is something, a pilot that we've got here, that basically creates a textbook for you. It engages with you. It asks you questions, how you answer them, the speed that you answer them, the accuracy that you answer them. It then creates a book for you that is designed for you and your strengths and your weaknesses to help support you through the academic journey. Just one example. Another one, on a practice management note that you might appreciate also, is the idea of negotiating. So what we know, and you've seen this data many times, there's a huge gap between men and women in terms of compensation. And I'm graduating 80% women here. If I ignore that, shame on me. I mean, we have to try to help to balance that in some way. And when we've had these conversations, it's not 100% of the time, but a significant percent of the time, it's about a comfort level with negotiating. Sometimes it's cultural. Sometimes it's just a comfort level. I've never had to do it. I don't know what to do it. And here's the problem. When an employer comes in, they've got a range of salary in their head. And if they present a salary and you say, yeah, good, they move on. If you push back a little bit, you're probably going to make a little bit more. So what we learned is that negotiating skills can make a difference. It's not the only one, but it can make a difference. So we created a template of a bot that will do a simulated engagement with you with an employer. And then afterwards, it'll give you some ideas on how you might have been able to do this better. Just two small examples. We're also looking to completely revamp our curriculum. That's for another day. And we're already in the midst of that. But those are just two examples of many that we're looking at where AI can be make us bigger than we are, give us more resources than we really have, try to be much more individualized. And that's what's happening. Education is becoming and will become completely individualized. It's not, we all sit in a big classroom, we all listen, we memorize, we take a test, and then if we pass it, we're good. That is evolving very quickly to something very different from that. And I'll take it one step further, and I know this is somewhat controversial, but the day may come where we're not going to be memorizing every disease known to man and be able to espouse that. The day may come where what we'll be training on is observation skills, empathy, communication. That's what doctoring, ultimately is likely to be, because all this other data is right at our fingertips, right in front of our eyes, wherever it's going to be, likely to be in something we wear on our face. It's still going to be important to know that information, but how much time we spend on that versus some of these other skills that computers, bots can't, at least today, do very well, and how we complement that are things that we're talking about.
I'm glad you brought up that last point, because I was just talking to someone recently who's in the world of IT, and he leads a team and they're very focused on data and technology. And he told his team, look, a lot of the things we're doing on the technology side is not going to differentiate us. What's going to differentiate us is how we communicate the technology. And another thing I wish I understood better when I was in school was the value of being able to communicate with patients. We all basically, once we get out of school, have the same level of education, right? Now, some maybe do a little better than others in school, but we all come out at somewhat of a level playing field, but we don't all succeed at the same level. And I find so much of it, the ability to communicate well, empathy, compassion, these sorts of things that aren't, I don't think they're always highlighted in school as being as important as they are.
I think you're right. I think the thread that ties together our most successful colleagues, candidly, is their ability to communicate. I use this example all the time. Dr. Vargo is the world-renowned expert in glaucoma. He knows more than anybody in the world about glaucoma. But if he can't convince me to put those drops in my eyes or to go get a procedure done, he fails.
Right.
So,
outcomes matter. That's all that matters.
It doesn't matter. Now, you need to have the knowledge. We're not downplaying the importance of the knowledge. But what we're saying is knowledge in and of itself isn't success. Success is your ability to communicate, to gain trust, to have someone trust in your judgments. And this is something we do talk about a lot around here. I promise you that. I think all the schools do, because we realize it. When we're interviewing people, the primary role of that interview, in my mind, is, can this person communicate? It's, I got nothing against you if you're not a great communicator, but optometry might not be the perfect place for you if that's the case, because consistently I see it. You and I could name, our favorite 10 optometrists out there. And probably what ties them all together is they're incredible communicators. And it's something we do work on here, that we talk about, and we try to pick people, identify people, at least come in. It's hard to sit in a group, there's 3 people interviewing you, but it tells us a little bit about your ability to communicate. At that point, your grades have been seen, everything's done. It's like, can you communicate with people in a not so easy environment sometimes is helpful, because we don't want to set you up for failure, right?
Well, I'm definitely not the guy you want to see for glaucoma, but the point made. And Howard, I just want one more question for you. And I apologize because I don't remember if this is what we were talking about before we hit record, or we were talking about it during the recording. But you were talking about how ODs need to be advocates to a younger generation. I think you gave the example as a doctor. If you have got a young patient in the chair talking about what you're doing and creating some excitement. You were talking about how a lot of ODs that you interview through the process of NICO, having a story, something that happened that triggered them on an emotional level to get them interested in optometry. And a lot of times it was talking with another OD or somebody else who was involved with the field. So my question to you, let's say you're still in practice and you got that little kid sitting in the chair. What do you say to him
Yeah,
or
that's
her?
great. First of all, I agree 100% that we have that ability, that is where the rubber meets the road, that, there are so many, if you think of the number of patients sitting in our chairs in a given day in optometric practices, that is a ripe group of people who appreciate what we do and might even see this as a potential career. But to answer your question more directly, when I have that someone sitting in my chair and I see any inkling, it's usually the time I'm going to probably spend a little bit more is high school and above. If it's an elementary school, I may play with something and get them interested, but I'm not going to start necessarily talking about the profession. But high school and above, hey, have you ever thought about optometry? I just usually will propose that. No, I don't know that much about it. Gives me an open door. Or yes, I've thought about it. So I set the stage by, hey, have you ever thought about optometry? It's a wonderful career. And then see where it goes from there. I'll let them get on the other side of a slit lamp and take a look. I'll, show them the things that I'm doing. I'll pull up a retinal image. Look, this is what your eye looks like. I think like that is think about the first time you ever really saw a retina, right? Like, wow, that's pretty neat. So what I try to do is just, wow, this is fun. This is cool, and plant the seed. That's all you really need to do. You'd be surprised at how much of an impact that has. We talk a lot around here also about the type of doctor you want to be. The type of doctor they're going to be is the influence they've had from doctors that they've seen. Who was your best doctor that you ever had? I ask them that a lot. And what were the attributes that doctor brought to the table? So these are the kinds of things that I think they see it. They see how much you enjoy what you do. Most optometrists really like what they do. Optometry consistently rated as one of the most, gives you the most satisfaction in terms of a job in the top 5, usually, most of the time. We should play to that strength and make sure that great people see optometry as a potential career. So I will say, have you ever thought about optometry as a career? No, tell me more about it. Or, what is it? Or, oh, I don't know, I'm not that good in science or something, whatever. But it starts the conversation. I don't do it with every single patient, I have to be honest, but where I do it is in situations where someone has shown some ink. What are you doing? What does that do? You get that. I mean, we all get that here and there. It's a perfect lead in to talk about it. And honestly, you're doing it subconsciously too. Even if you're not talking about it, when you're being who you are and showing what you do, that alone is wonderful. But if we can consider taking it to the next step and saying, by the way, have you ever thought about optometry as a profession? Even better. But it is the #1 way, at least here at NECO. And when I talk to my colleagues at other schools, it's the same. Most everybody has had a positive experience that has led them here. They've seen someone has showed them the path, that they enjoy what they're doing and has treated them in a way that has really left an impression. And that's huge for us. And so I would hope that the listeners here would consider that if you're not already doing it. And it is not for one particular school. Just talk about optometry. If it's your school and you had a great experience, great. Talk about it. And by the way, no school would exist today if our alums are saying they had a terrible experience and would never go back. So, clearly we're doing okay. And look, there's more we can do. The schools can do more. And let me say this, the way you can help us is to talk to potential candidates, Tell them what a wonderful profession it is. And also, I would just ask to support your faculty, support academia. I read all too often such critical comments about what we do from people who really aren't involved in it. And I was one of those. Now that I'm in it, talk to us, engage with us, tell us your frustrations, but listen to us a little bit about some of the challenges we face today, some of the challenges our students are facing today. We're all in this together. That's why I love, Gary Chu has done a wonderful job with our industry collaborative every year and just really trying to bring that out and share as much as possible, whether it's good, bad, ugly. It's important. We're all in this together, and it starts at the schools and colleges. And when you have a chance, say thank you to a faculty member you know. Thank them for what they do. They're actually more than likely making less money than you are, but they've chosen to do that because they want to help prepare the future of this profession, and they give so much to that. Say thank you once in a while. That would be a wonderful thing to do. What can we do for you is we're going to make sure we produce the best optometrists we can, to pick the best students we know are going to continue to help this profession thrive. And they're here, they're doing it. And get involved, support them, be a mentor for them, whatever it is that you can do. Remember what it was like in school and try to support them how you can. They're our future, and the future is bright. It really is. I promise you it is.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it is a wonderful profession. I've always said that. And no profession is perfect, but I think collectively I've always been very proud to identify as an OD, whether I was practicing or in the role I am now. But it's a wonderful group of people. I have so many friends and colleagues, and I'm very proud to call myself an OD. Howard, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time. I know I brought you on because I hear a lot of say the older ODs, right? Us guys. Wondering what's
you're
going
putting
on
yourself in my category now.
I'm on the cusp. I don't know where I land anymore. I feel like it's somewhere in the middle. But yeah, just so many practice owners, and I think they can appreciate this. Just wondering what's in the mind of the younger OD. They want to understand them better, and they're willing to work with them. They understand there's a generational difference there. Things are different now, not good, not bad, just different. But they really want to understand the mindset of the younger OD, as do I. But I hope younger ODs and students listening to this as well could get some takeaways on maybe what's going on in the mind of the more seasoned OD too. So I think I wanted to bridge the gap between these two, and I think we did that thanks to your insights.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Look, these students are amazing. They are so smart. They are so dedicated. They're nervous because they don't really know what to think or where to go or what to do. Many of them come in, they don't really know what aspect of optometry they really want to focus on, and ultimately they find something they truly love. But we're a close-knit profession. We always have been. How do we support each other? And how do we do less of the criticizing and pointing fingers and a little bit more of the let's talk directly to each other and find ways to continue to improve? I respect people who do that. I'm open to that anytime. If anyone ever wants to speak to me, purcellh@neco.edu, reach out, please. The more I hear from people, the better I can be at doing my job. And Steve, I appreciate the opportunity that you and IDOC have provided for me to share a little bit of my perspective. So thanks a lot. I hope we'll see you in Boston sometime soon.
Thanks so much, Howard. I appreciate it. And thanks for everyone listening. And we will see you in the next episode.